The transformation of Air India, it is now, of course, a Tata product, is one of the most talked about aspects of international aviation. It is a huge transformation process. It's one that's going to take several years. It's far from being done. Along with new acquisitions, there have been new challenges as well. A lot of that is something which the airline is dealing with. There are new fleet acquisitions taking place. There is a new culture in place in Air India as well. They've got a transformation program called Vihaan.AI. To tell us a little bit about that, we've got the CEO and MD of Air India. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson, for being with us.
A pleasure, Vishnu.
To you a couple of years back. It is an interesting time when it comes to Vistara and Air India integrating. They are now entirely integrated. But there are those who say that, look, Vistara was a wonderful product. It had a wonderful reputation. And therefore, is the legacy of Vistara not being diluted?
Well, I think more to the point is that Vistara now allows Air India the opportunity to be catalysed and the transformation accelerated, and a new airline which represents the best of both Vistara and the legacy of Air India to be born. It was always part of the plan to bring the four Tata airlines together. It was necessary for many reasons, not least of which is economies of scale and profitability and the ability to further grow. And to build an Air India that represents the India that people expect to see around the world, and an airline that reflects the warmth and hospitality of India. So it's been a big project, it's been a long project, but I think the team has worked very hard, and it's nice to have the merger phase of that behind us.
Yeah. Would you say the merger is actually behind you? Because there are crews who are different, with different work cultures, whether it's cabin crew or it's flight crew coming in. Has that been a challenge in terms of adaptation or bringing together different work cultures?
Well, we've spent 2 years in the preparation and execution of this merger, aligning all of the operating procedures, the regulatory compliances and manuals, the IT systems, the terms and conditions of employment, now the physical locations. And so it's not as if it's happened all at once overnight. It's been a very progressive process. But yes, for the moment we are operating Vistara aircraft with Vistara crew, so that the product experience of the customer is something that is what they expect. But progressively we will bring everything together into a coherent whole. That process will take time. One of the reasons that we've actually held back a little bit on the Air India culture development program is because we wanted the people from Vistara and AirAsia and Express to be part of co-creating it, so they feel that they have ownership in it. And so that's going to be something we evolve into in 2025, is uniting the organisation behind the common mission of the Air India group. And I think people are bought into it anyway. I mean, it's the national name, it's a 93-year-old airline, it's an airline that's growing massively with plenty of opportunity. So I think we have the right ingredients, we just need to bring them together.
And yet you did have some problems. For example, cabin crew decided that at one stage on Air India Express, they wouldn't fly. Hundreds of flights got cancelled. You had problems with pilots in Vistara saying that, look, we have problems as well. You had hundreds of flight cancellations on both airlines. How was that a huge challenge for you in the year that's gone by?
Well, I think, put it in context, there's 30,000 employees in the new Air India group. There were actually 5 groups of employees because the Indian Airlines Air India merger was never fully consummated. And so we had to bring all of this together. Now, in the global context, airline mergers can take 5 to 7 years. This has been done in a little over 2. And when you bring different employee groups, different terms and conditions together, you don't pick the best of everything, but neither do you pick the worst. And so there is a mix of pluses and minuses. Now, if you look at individual elements, some people can say this is better, some people can say this is worse, but on balance, I'm absolutely convinced that it is better. Right. For each individual group. And I think more so, the opportunity available to people is much, much greater than it was ever before, simply by virtue of the fact that we've got so many aircraft, there is such ambition to grow, there's such ambition to improve the product, that the opportunity for personal and career development is unparalleled.
Yeah. And yet there are problems which suddenly emerge. There is social media, which I know has been a bit of a nightmare for all airlines. when you've got, for example, flight crew complaining or cabin crew complaining and saying, look, this is a broken aircraft. There's been some Facebook posts of late, and that it's deeply problematic. And look, they aren't serving even a proper glass of water. You're a forward-facing industry and a public-facing one at that. When you have challenges like that from your own staff, does it not represent a huge challenge?
Well, clearly, our cabin crew, our staff, want to operate a product that they are proud of, that allows them to provide the service that they want to provide. And it's fair to say that particularly the legacy aircraft that we inherited were not up to that standard. And it just takes a long time. We committed $400 million to buy the seats, to refurbish those aircraft. The seats have been in the certification and manufacturing process since then. They will start to be installed on the wide-body aircraft next year. About a third of the narrow-body fleet are already done. But it will take a while to bring the legacy aircraft up to that standard. Having said that, we've got a third of the wide-body fleet either brand new in the case of the 350s or modern interiors with the 777s. And those have a fantastic customer experience.
I'll talk about that in a moment, but I just want to speak a little bit more about the culture. And the reason I say that is because, we have passengers who often write into us and say that, the flight's delayed. We had Peter Damram, the former finance minister. We had Adnan Sami day before yesterday with certain flight complaints. And I know it's true of all airlines. It's not just Air India by any means. But I sense that people are impatient for better results, more on-time performance, a better service on board, better food on board. I know what Air India will ultimately look like, but how would you address the present concerns of passengers?
Well, I think I'd point to a couple of key facts, or three. One, Air India was the most punctual airline in the country in September and October. Two, our A350, which is flying to Heathrow and to New York, has an NPS of 70, as adjudged by customers. Our domestic operation has an NPS of 40, which is the same as Vistara was. So I think, yes, there's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be events that we regret or that we don't handle well. But we carry 60 million people a year across the group. We operate more than 1,200 flights every day. And so it is a mass transportation business. And unfortunately, there are occasions where it's not perfect, but we're progressively getting better. And I think if you look particularly at the NPS, the customer themselves is saying that we're getting significantly better. It's just that we have to be more consistent and continue that process, because I'm as impatient as anyone of improving this to the level that meets customer expectations all the time.
Air India used to be fairly heavily unionized. Large corporates have problems with unions for various reasons, and I'm not getting into the merits of unions themselves. But when the problem with Air India Express arose, and there were certain unions representing cabin crew, it would have clashed with the corporate values of Air India and what you personally perhaps felt was required to enhance efficiency within the airline. Was that again a challenge for you in dealing with unions, which has been a part of the culture of this airline?
Irrespective of unionization or not, what was the root cause of people's concern? And that's been something we've been looking at across this whole transformation program. There were work practices, there was absence of job descriptions in the erstwhile Air India, there was absence of due process and performance management, there was the remuneration wasn't at market levels, the benefits weren't at market levels, certainly the promotion and progression opportunities, the training, all of these were not at what we felt was necessary. And we've invested in and improved all of those. Now, are there areas where people think we should go further? And by all means, that's a discussion to have. But I think over the last couple of years, the employee proposition at Air India Group, and particularly the opportunity looking forward, is a light year shift. And so we're committed to making Air India a place that people want to work, people want to stay, and people want to build a career.
There was a concern which is turned up in the media of flight crew on long-haul flights saying that the number of hours they rest compulsorily might result in reduced salaries. Is that true?
Well, I'm not entirely sure of the commentary you're talking about.
It was something which was apparently raised to the DGCA by Air India, as I understand it.
So I think there is a discussion on the flight duty time
FDTA,
limitations that the DGCA oversee. And there's obviously different perspectives. India doesn't yet adopt what is an international standard of fatigue risk management system, which is a much more data-driven, sophisticated approach to managing fatigue risk. It's still quite prescriptive with hard lines. And so I think the discussion that you might be referring to, if I'm correct, was involved in how should India align with international best practice, and what are the pros and cons of doing so. Beyond that, I wasn't present, so I don't really know.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about what we'd started to speak about, the refurbishment of the fleet, because I think that is the biggest demand of passengers, and I think there's a lot of merit in that. Even on your long-haul aircraft, the product is old, it's damaged inside. It's not your fault per se, it's just an industry lack of availability of components for refurbishment, right? And what is the status of that?
Well, as I say, 1/3 of the wide-body fleet is now modernised, either with new aircraft or aircraft with modern interiors that we've leased. And they're probably the ones that the customer is most concerned about because they're in it for longer. As I say, we committed $400 million to the new seats in 2022 and chose the seats, and since then have been working to certify and have them produced and ultimately installed. 2 different seat suppliers, reflecting just the nature of the post-COVID supply chain, came to us and said, the dates we committed to deliver we can no longer meet. There's going to be a delay of, in one case, 6 months, in one case a little bit longer. And so a retrofit program that was going to have already started in the case of both our 787s and our 777s is now pushed into starting in 2025. It's frustrating. Unfortunately, it is what it is. We don't have any control of that. Many other airlines are affected by similar constraints. Right. But the fact is, it's going to happen. The first ship set of 787 seats comes in April. They'll be installed in the aircraft. The aircraft will go through a certification program, and hopefully it's back into service in October of next year, following which we can start accelerating a couple of aircraft every month through this to completion. The 777 delay was a little bit longer.
Yes.
Again, it should have already started. It's going to now have to have an interim refresh during 2025, and then 2026 we'll go through the full interior refit.
So we're looking at the end of 2026 for the refurbishment to be well underway. Would that be correct? For both these aircraft types?
Well underway, if not close to completion. Right. For the narrow-body aircraft, middle of 2025
yes.
is where they will
And
be
you've
complete.
started that out with your A320 fleet?
Yes.
How would you respond to those who say that Vistara has a great product on their A320 fleet and the A321 fleet, and that the Air India refurbished aircraft or the existing ones may not quite match that? Would there be parity in terms of quality in the refurbished product?
Well, the refurbished ones, yes. Although there are a small subset of Vistara aircraft that were configured for international operations, so they have a slightly different configuration from the other Vistara aircraft. But I think we're cognizant of the fact that the Vistara aircraft are newer and they were fitted out at a higher spec than the legacy Air India. So we've made the decision that from 1st of December, all of the metro routes in India are going to be operated with the Vistara aircraft. So it's 27 flights a day between Delhi and Mumbai, dozens of flights between the other metros, more than 1,000 flights a week are now exclusively with the Vistara product, with obviously an Air India 2 something flight number.
Right.
And that's an acknowledgement that for those premium metro routes, we do want to offer a consistent, high-quality proposition, and I think that's a first manifestation of the benefits of the merger of the airlines.
I noticed my hometown of Kolkata is missing from your list of aircraft with the better interiors.
It is just a matter of time because, as I say, middle of 2025, the whole full-service narrow-body fleet will have been upgraded.
I know that safety is obviously your primary concern. It has to be. And yet we've had instances when you've been fined a couple of times by the DGCA, crew not being properly trained to operate certain flights. Why is this happening? Why has it happened more than once?
Each thing has a different cause. Sometimes it's legacy practice. Sometimes it is a matter of human oversight. Sometimes it's a matter of a systemic gap or something that hasn't been addressed or mitigated through another means. We open ourselves for audit every 6 months. We open ourselves for external audit, whether by IATA or other parties, And that is done with a mission of getting better. And each thing that is identified in these audits that we do ourselves and invite from others is an opportunity to improve. And so it is something that we need to keep at, and something that we will spare no expense in doing.
Yeah. There's been this horrible situation in the last 1 month with bomb threats to Indian airlines. In a sense, it's very, very fortunate, of course, that these are all hoax calls. When you woke up every morning with news from your executives and your flight controller saying, look, we have a problem over here, and then another one, and then another one, and it went on going, on and on. Those must have been very tense times for you.
Well, certainly, I mean, we take all of these threats seriously, and it's not a case of waking up in the morning to the news. It's, I get woken up with the news. Yes. We take them all seriously, and just the sheer number and the duration over which these threats persisted was, I think, globally unprecedented. But it is the nature of aviation that there is going to be some event that wakes you up in the middle of the night, whether it's a global conflict somewhere, whether it is a hoax, whether it is a snowstorm in New York that's caused some aircraft to divert to Pittsburgh or elsewhere. That is, I mean, I don't say unfortunately because we chose this industry. That is the nature of the game, and so it's part and parcel of the job.
Do you believe that crisis or that situation has been resolved?
Well, we don't know what the cause was, to be honest, because we're a private organisation. We don't have the ability to go back and identify exactly who and why they did what they did. But I think what it resulted in is, at the regulatory and industry level, there were new protocols and procedures put in place to more consistently and in a more timely fashion, with more expertise, make a quick assessment of what was the nature of the threat, what was the seriousness of the threat, and therefore what actions should be recommended or taken. From the airline perspective, nothing really changed, because whenever there's a threat that's deemed of sufficient seriousness, there's a very clear course of action, whether it's to hold the aircraft back, land the aircraft, or other things.
We've had fog season this year about a month earlier than normal. There were several Air India aircraft which were diverted. And as I understand it, one of the factors, and this is what we've been told, is non-compliance with the flight crew in operating Category 3 instrument landing systems, primarily in Delhi. Was that a rostering problem or a non-availability of pilots? Why did that happen?
Well, I think that, let's be honest here, the fog protocols, which require the rostering of Category 3 qualified crew, typically start on 1st of December. This fog event was highly unusual, and it happened on the 13th of November. So the rostering protocols and the requirements weren't even valid at that point. So it's completely wrong to say that Air India did not comply. Having said that, there were clearly some diversions, and it happens regardless. I mean, when you go to Cat 3 at an airport, the ability of the airport to manage the same volume of throughput reduces.
Right.
So there almost certainly is going to be some delay or diversion. Unfortunately for us, it happened literally 36 hours after we had done the merger with Air India and Vistara.
Yeah.
And so systems were still stabilizing, people were still getting used to new areas of reporting, new ways of reporting. So it struck us actually at the most vulnerable time. And there was a reason actually we chose the 12th of November to do our merger, because it was after Diwali, it was before the fog season, and we thought that's a window in which we're going to be able to do the merger without too much threat of disruption. Unfortunately, as fate would have it, we got disruption.
Are any learning experiences in that? Because the climate is changing, stubble burning is a constant problem, air pollution over the skies of North India. Would you be more ready perhaps next year, should something like this happen?
Well, bear in mind that the merger was a one-off event, and I don't expect to be doing another one next year. But clearly it's something that we're going to have to consider, that if, in addition to fog, we now have to worry about severe visibility reduction as a consequence of stubble burning, then yes, maybe we, but also the industry, needs to consider, do we want to bring the Cat 3 threshold a little bit earlier? But having said that, that's a much bigger issue than just aviation. There's 25 million people in this metropolis who suffer the consequences too.
You have an incredible competitor in Indigo at this stage. I mean, you had a record order of aircraft. They sort of had another record order of aircraft. They want to go big internationally. They've, also have placed orders for A350 aircraft. There would be a premium cabin on board as well. Does that change the nature of the competition in the future, in the very near future, between you and your primary competitor in India?
Well, competition will always evolve. India is the third largest market, air travel market in the world. It's growing at 7% a year. It's increasingly important on the international stage as well. Clearly there's going to be plenty of opportunity for airlines, not just the incumbent ones. There is a period of consolidation. I think that same consolidation has been seen in decades earlier in North America and in Europe. It allows for professionalization, it allows for capital injection. Ultimately, it builds a profitable ecosystem that attracts new entrants to come in. It's just the phase of evolution. Air India has 120 aircraft with a business class product. It has 70 wide-body aircraft flying to the four corners of the world. It's committed to 470 aircraft plus aircraft that we're leasing in. So we're not afraid of competition. It will take various forms. But look, it's a growing market and there's a huge opportunity, and I'm sure that there's going to be more people want to partake of it.
When we spoke, I think a year or so back, we spoke about the potential new routes that Air India would be exploring. At that stage, you'd mentioned Australia, and I think recently also Air India has expressed a greater interest in Australia. You got into an agreement with Australia Tourism, as I understand it. What are some of the other exciting areas where Indian travelers may be traveling, perhaps even non-stop on your aircraft, or most likely non-stop on your aircraft?
So we've added 23 new destinations, nearly 100 new routes since privatization, and that's largely enabled by the 100 aircraft that we've added net to the group. And new destinations are going to be a function of receiving more aircraft. But we see opportunity nearly everywhere, North America, UK, Europe, Australasia, Asia, in time to come, Africa too, I'm sure, near Asia. That is the beauty of I think, the Indian opportunity, is Indians are traveling more. There's a huge diaspora. There's historically been an absence of direct links between India and the major cities in the world. And so our mission is to fill that space as quickly and as effectively as we can.
You're acquiring planes, one plane every 6 odd days for one of Air India Express, Air India or Vistara, and that's fantastic, that's phenomenal. But do you have a problem with flight crews in terms of numbers? Are you getting trained personnel fast enough? There's been, again, a concern which has been raised that India has to bring in pilots from outside because there's a void in the country. So is there a shortage still that you face?
So in aggregate, no, but in specific pockets, yes. So for example, Air India was the only operator of 777 aircraft in India. It operated the vast majority of 787s. Yes. And so when you add 11 777s, virtually in the space of 2 or 3 months, there's just not the pool available to train and get the necessary experience for people to operate those aircraft in a hurry. So yes, we did need to bring in some folk from overseas. Similarly on the 737, because that's quite a tight pool as well. Yeah. But that's a very temporary phenomenon. That only is done because it then allows to put the aircraft into service, which fills a market gap, which allows people to fly, which gives a first officer the chance to get experience and ultimately become a commander, gives the cabin crew an opportunity. And we very much want to, and indeed are, backfilling with Indian pilots. We've committed to a flight school in Maharashtra. We've committed to more than 20 flight simulators at our training academy in Gurgaon, which is, the building is finished. The first simulator gets installed in February, March. So we are absolutely committed to building the Indian talent pool. It's just the rapid rate of our growth, and particularly of certain aircraft types, means that we need a little bit of external assistance in the near term to kickstart it.
Yeah. So Vihaan.AI, where are you right now in terms of converting a legacy airline into a new airline? And how in your own mind do you balance legacy with a new Air India for the future? Is legacy sometimes a bad word?
It depends on what you connote with legacy.
Inefficiency.
personally, I think 92-year history, periods where Air India was renowned as one of the best airlines in the world. Warmth of Indian hospitality, the iconic pictures we've seen of the crew in saris and the 747s. That, I think, is the legacy we want to carry forward. Now, there's going to be elements that come from Vistara, the operations, the consistency. There's going to be new things that we add to the mix. But I think the sheer breadth and richness of ingredients that we have at our disposal gives me huge confidence in the future of Air India. Now, with respect to the transformation and where we are, we made no secret of the fact that it was going to be a multi-year program. We said 5 years. The economists called this the Everest of corporate turnarounds for a reason. We're a little over 2 years into this Vihaan.AI program, and we've sort of done the first 6 months of triage. We've done the next 12 months of putting the capacities and capabilities in. Brought the average age from 54 to 35, 9,000 new staff, bought 4 airlines into 2, 140 IT systems, 100 new aircraft, new training academies, started base maintenance facility. So many things have happened in the last 2 years. It is certainly not the finished product. I know that there's a huge amount of expectation and indeed impatience for the future Air India to fully emerge. I am equally impatient for that to happen, as I'm sure my colleagues will happily recount. But I think if we step back and look at what has been done in 2.5 years, there are airlines that have gone from public ownership to private. There are airlines that have gone from rebranded, airlines that have changed 140 IT systems, airlines that have restructured their entire management team, airlines that have bought in flagship aircraft, airlines that have merged. But I don't think anywhere in history is an example of an airline doing it all at once. And that is a credit, I think, not just to the team, but also to aviation ecosystem in India, including the DGCA and the ministry and others that have enabled this to happen, where in other countries it's taken 5 to 8 years to achieve the same thing.
And you'll do that in 5. You maintain that the transformation
so
will be
all
done
of the things I've talked
years.
about have been done in 2.
Exactly.
Whereas elsewhere they've taken 5 to 8.
I see.
So I think credit should be given to India for what is being achieved, even though I'm the first to acknowledge that it's a job that is not yet finished and we have a lot more to do.
Right. Just to wrap this up with a little clarification, when would the large majority of 777s and Dreamliners have been refurbished at the present rate of refurbishment? And when would you start acquiring new A350s in the interim period?
Well, we're in this hiatus period now of the aircraft that were available for rapid delivery, whether by lease or...
They've all been delivered.
They've all been delivered
and
for the most part. There's about 14 more 737s to come.
Right.
The aircraft that come off the production line will be towards the end of 2025.
I see.
And then they come at a fairly rapid pace thereafter. So there is this period whereby we'll start the refit program, start the refresh program, but won't grow at a great rate. And so that's an opportunity for us to ensure improvement in efficiency and consistency and keep strengthening the customer proposition. But it's going to wait
2025 end, 2026
is
by
when,
the time...
when the line fit aircraft start coming in.
Right.
And then the refitting of the aircraft starts in 2025. There are 40 wide-body aircraft to go through the system. Yes, I know, it's a huge number. Yeah. We can't ground all 40 at the same time for obvious reasons, so it will take a couple of years.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much, sir, for talking to us. And I appreciate the fact that you take on these direct questions. And I look forward to the Air India journey. It is truly a fascinating challenge. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.